My name's Daniel Seiden. I'm one of the product directors here at Automata. And on behalf of everyone at Automata, I want to thank you all for joining tonight's Lab Futures Forum. As some of you may be aware, the Lab Futures Forum is a monthly event where we host in conjunction with Bits and Bio. They're our partners in this event. And if you're not familiar yet with Bits and Bio, I would encourage you to give them a quick Google. Bits and Bio community is a community here in the UK, and indeed also they have another community in America. And they're focused on bringing together the individuals that build the tools that help scientists unlock new insights. And they have a diverse membership of individuals, ranging everywhere from PhD students, scientists, lab technicians, and indeed the venture capital community looking for that next great startup. So I'd encourage you to check out their website, join their Slack space. There's some very interesting discussions that run in parallel to many of the things we talk about here at the Lab Futures Forum. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about our upcoming events here before we kick off on the main event for tonight. The Lab Futures Forum aims to bring together the life sciences community to really progress the discourse around the latest technology and the application of those technologies within our space. And we have started about 6 months ago with this monthly meetup. And it started just as an informal drinks session down at a bar in King's Cross where people would come after work, and has grown to what you see here today. So thank you all for attending. Thank you all for coming, and please do spread the word. We have an amazing lineup of talks coming up for the rest of the year. In October, we have a session on in silico wet lab validation. And then following up in November, we're going to be having a discussion on the closed loop laboratory and how AI decision engines meet programmatic workflows in order to accelerate discovery. So for more information on all of those, please keep an eye on the Automata events page. So for tonight, we have two speakers for you. We'll be starting off with Rui Campos, my colleague here. Rui is the director of LINQ Cloud here at Automata, and he'll be speaking on Automata's cloud-first approach and the benefits of this approach. And this will be followed up by our esteemed guest speaker, David Ruau. David is the Alliance Lead for Pharma in EMEA at NVIDIA, and he'll be discussing AI predictive guidance and decision-making in drug discovery. So a little bit of housekeeping. We have people here in person, and we have a group of folks who are joining online. After the presentations, we're going to be opening it up to Q&A between David and Rui. And we'll also be taking questions from the audience here and the audience online. So do please submit your questions if you're online, and I'll be monitoring the questions and bringing those to David and Rui as the discussion carries on. With that, I think we're ready to hand over to Rui.
Thank you, Dan. Here we go. Thank you all for joining us today, online and in person. I'll talk a little bit about Automata, do a bit of an intro. Automata LINQ platform, which if you were here today, you would have seen it working, and how cool it is to see all of these machines getting connected, is a full stack solution for lab automation that integrates scientific instruments, as you can see, with a space-saving modular robot-enabled lab bench. So you can start small and then keep growing it up and reconfigure it as you see fit. This allows labs to design, schedule, and manage workflows, even remotely, through the use of our cloud-based software. The platform addresses inefficiencies in the life sciences labs through its modularity and modern tech stack. Given that it's a cloud solution, it enables collaboration because everyone can now be working over the same workflow and defining what they want to achieve together. One key value add that our platform enables or introduces is a scheduling system that enables both planning and dynamic execution into one. So you no longer have just a dynamic execution scheduler that you have to simulate 10 times to figure out the best optimal path for it to execute. You can actually plan in ahead, define what the outcome it is. The system will go and decide what the best path it is to achieve that, And then during the execution itself, if anything changes, the system will find the best path, replan, and continue the execution through that. So you don't have to go into this simulation mode of go try 10 times in order to get there. You can define once, let the system figure everything out for you. And even on the day, if anything has a slight variation, the system will identify the best path to do it and continue. But the cornerstone of everything that we do is our focus on outcome, because we have probably one of the biggest customer success teams for the size that we have in terms of company. And our main thing is delivering for the customer. What is the outcome that we're trying to achieve? And our teams go into hypercare mode to ensure that we always get that outcome done. And that team will only leave when that is like the work cell is operating and is delivering exactly what the customer asks for. And if we could now start to think about where we are at this point after COVID, is COVID changed everything in the industry. It forced technological advancements, and it even changed regulatory law into things that we were doing before had to be rethought. And this opened up this possibility about the technological advances that happened, and it opened the industry and to start to look into all of these advances and how can we now start to bring this in. And at Automata, what we're seeing is several drivers of change that I would like to talk to you a little bit about new lab standards. So we're seeing people talking to us about automation first, as we start with the automation and then we build from that, which is a fundamental shift from many things that we're seeing pre-COVID, where people probably wouldn't consider that unless they're already trying to scale. And now it's being seen as the de facto standard. We're seeing things like data structuring and augmentation of data as a key fundamental aspect for any lab to really bring forward. Things like self-serve, both physical and digital. Like we created our own modular system with the aspiration that it can even be self-serve at some point. But we're also seeing this need to do the self-serve even as you integrate with other systems to enable teams in-house to do it themselves. More, how can we move fast? This is something that we hear a lot. We're seeing things like easy integration into modern tech stacks. We're very well equipped because we started there. Everything that we've built in our platform is in a modern tech stack. Things like collaboration tools and approaches that are more collaborative. This is every day we see this more and more and more. And this is part of why our solution is a cloud solution, is to enable that collaboration. You don't need to be there in front of that machine to operate it. You could be remotely, you could be in front of your desk, seeing exactly what is happening and monitoring what is happening. For example, the system itself could be operating, running, and if there's an error, you could get a notification and go and check it out in your application. Could be that is something that you just say, I know what it is. I can skip it. And you don't have to leave your desk. Or it could be, oh, I really have to go and check this. You go and move, you go and check what happened. You fix it and let it continue. You can say retry, and it just retries and continues to operate in whatever you're trying to achieve. We also have another side to this, which has to do with a data chain. So in the past, data was very sparse and across the board. And what we're seeing is everyone wants to connect this chain together now for various reasons, from the beginning to the end, to enable AI models to be built, to enable, if you're going to now generate an IP that has an AI model, to even cross that entire path and provide visibility over this. This also leads into data pipelining and how you connect all of these things together, and how systems really enable bringing the data from the start, the idea, the experiment that was set together, the projects that are going to be delivering on that experiment, tying that entire set back into even augmented data about environmental conditions that could be operating with these machines, into the execution that that workflow has done, and for what the experiment actually delivered and collected and fed back into this. To then transformation of this data into something that an AI model can really absorb and take all the way back into the IP that it generates. This leads me into the rise of the data catalog. Everyone talks about this for ages, but now it's starting to become something that is fundamental. How do you search something that has already been done? How do you bring all of this together and enable it for the entire organization to start deriving value out of it? Because when you start to build AI models, in most cases, you need this data catalog, which is your gold data that you want to prime and then feed, and then extract the values that you want to take from it. And I was touching about data, AI, and IP because from a regulatory perspective, once models, AI models start to make predictions and you start to generate IP from it, there will be regulations saying that you have to now tie it back into the data that led into that model generating this prediction of something that is going to happen. And we're not there yet, but it feels like in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll likely have some regulation coming in that is going to enforce a little bit of that. Thinking ahead and preparing for that and having all of this data set in place that supports it is the smart move. We're also seeing an interest in AI in the loop, or lab in the loop, as some people call it. We even have here today a machine that is a intelligent controller of our work cell that has NVIDIA embedded into it. And this is the types of partnerships that we're working with, and why we're here today to talk with David, is how can we enable even further? How can you make those decision-making directly inside of the work cell? And we're opening and exploring on that side because it's so novel. And it doesn't have to stop there. You could be doing the training there, but we're a cloud platform. You could do it outside. You could do it in the cloud and directly be interpreted by our system and provided there. And finally, labs into factories. One of the things that we're seeing with OpenAI is the amount of machines that they have, the amount of data that they're consuming in order to generate something that even today is like, it looks significantly great, everything that we can achieve with ChatGPT, but the amount of data that led into that is huge. And if we even think that it has hallucinations, it come up with the wrong results. We're not even there. We probably need another order of magnitude higher in terms of the data set in order to get it. And it could be that is not just the volume of the data set, is the quality of that data set. So when we look into the industry that is trying to also use AI models as predicting outcomes, and the volume of data that we have is so small because in many cases, because the machines, they just cannot digest more. They have a size, they have a set of things that they can do, and they do as best as they can. But now you have to start thinking of multiple of these machines. It's not one, it's not two, it could be 10 of them. So if you start to think about then the density and the size of any place that you're going to be putting these is very different than what we know today. And it's something that will start to grow, and we can start to see some indications of that. It may become something similar to an OpenAI, where what you have is now a factory. And that means these are lines. And you're going to have dense packed environments that are mostly have to be serviceable, but they're these data factories. They're there exactly just to pump all of this content out. But the journey starts with, you have to start from the beginning being automation that is going to drive you into that journey. And priming the data, augmenting it, and getting it into the right format, building your data catalog, and then scaling it up. But bringing it back to our theme of today of AI-driven drug discovery, which will become the norm in the next decade, with a shift towards this computational in silico instead of in vitro. I want to bring us into David and into the main topic of today. And I'll just bring, I think this one is connected. So I'll just bring this into David. And David, perhaps can you do an intro of yourself and what you do at
Sure.
NVIDIA?
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Rui. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, the Automata team, for having us today. It's, I mean, it's a fantastic event and a fantastic opportunity, I think, to evangelize what you describe as a data factory, because automated labs are data factory. And so what we do at NVIDIA, before I come to the introduction of myself, are AI factories. And AI factories feeds on data, a lot of data. And the more, the better. So yeah, so what I do at NVIDIA is in fact leading interactions and establishing business link with all the tech, bio, pharma, and let's say the life science and healthcare industry across all of Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So it's a big job, but it's a fascinating job, and I'm extremely happy to connect with you today, online and in person here today. And yeah, so yes, it's that's it. My background is in pharma, so I'm an experienced, basically, pharma lead. So I was in Bayer before, the pharma company, and I was in AstraZeneca before, and I had an academic career before that. So that's a bit about myself.
I know that you had a set of slides that maybe we could show.
Yeah. So to introduce a bit what is NVIDIA, because we know, so yeah, I mean, you can go to the next slide. Excellent, thank you. So NVIDIA is a company centered around the concept of accelerated computing. Some of you might know us from the good old days, and we still do it for gaming, okay? And we are still extremely good at that. And I think 10 years ago now, some people discovered that those type of processors were extremely good to do parallel computing. And that was the basis of the design we had at the time, parallel processing of vertex for 3D graphics. But what is a vertex and a parallel processing is basically matrix multiplication. And without going into much detail, what are deep learning neural network training jobs? They are matrix multiplication at scale, a very large scale. But that's it, okay? It's matrix multiplication. So the art is really to be able to represent your data into a matrix of numbers. You encode something, and you multiply it, you transform it, and at the end, you achieve something which is basically some kind of an intelligent system able to relate concepts between each other, okay? So within the healthcare life science domain, which is a very large and very intense area we focus on at NVIDIA, no, you can leave the slide from before. We provide a few solutions. It's not by no means exhaustive. What we have on the slide there is that we cover the domain of the value chain that you could imagine exist, you know, not the pipeline, but the value chain and the different process that exist within the drug discovery and healthcare science domain. So it can go from medical imaging, and that the traditional thing, that's how we started, analyzing digital pathology, digital radiology, going to medical device, and Automata has some of our hardware embedded into their labs, and a platform, I would say, which can become labs. We also heavily invested into the drug discovery domain. AI models are making extremely good results nowadays and are progressing quickly into the world of drug discovery for small molecule to protein design. And genomics. Genomics is, so I'm trained as a genetician, so genomics is basically also extremely data intensive, and it's driven by GPU nowadays, because the more data you gather, the more bottleneck you have, and you need a platform really to process those data at scale. So we are extremely invested, and you see at the bottom on the image on the screen, you see in fact the different frameworks. That's what we call our libraries, software in a way, that we provide are mostly open source, free to use, and engaging, and we describe basically this level of engagement as full stack. So you have a platform, an hardware, the servers, which are available everywhere in the cloud, on-prem, wherever you want, in your laptop. And you can use basically software to use this particular hardware, and we call that full stack. And we have software for genomics, for robotics. We have software for embedded instrument, medical device that we all face in our daily life when we go to the hospital, to generative AI for drug discovery. So it covers the broad spectrum, and that's just the healthcare domain. NVIDIA is way bigger than that, so we also have many other domains of interest. So that's an intro for NVIDIA, and we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So where we are at the moment in the healthcare life science domain are this concept of NVIDIA inference microservices. So it's a way for us to package all the mature algorithms that exist out there in AI and make it readily available and simpler to use for all the practitioner. So it's a way of deploying in a very simple way what we call microservices onto your platform and start using it. So it can be something like AlphaFold to fold proteins. You don't need to know and download from a repository and try to install with all the libraries that it has and the database that it contains. No, we package all of that and make it available into a microservices, a NIM. And we did that for a lot of other software. You certainly face, and you know, I mean, Rui was mentioning ChatGPT. So those large language models, which are generic interface where you can talk and react to, and they can understand what you mean. We also package a few of those software and models like Llama 2, Llama 3.1, and we work closely with the company which are producing those massive large language models. So NIMS, I wanted to finish with this particular picture and leave it in your mind. It's a way for us to bring basically the AI revolution closer to where it needs to be and embedded into particular software or everyday software. And that would be it for today. Yeah.
That's great. So that's a good segue into my next question, which is, where do we feel we are in the arc of capability and adoption within life sciences for AI?
So that's an extremely good question, and thank you for asking it, because where are we? I mean, it's, I think I often describe the progression of the field as the spread of the spectrum of, so in a way, the more you have of the heavy researchers, so the people which are really leading the field, the luminaries of the field, which are building those type of models, exist, and we know that, and they are pushing in this particular domain. And we have a very large spectrum of users, developers, people which are just fine-tuning or just using the model as such, all the way to the people which are very skeptic about this particular topic, and we go into the ethic concern, etc., of the world. And in fact, my metric to measure how far are we in this particular is the breadth, is that the fact that it's extremely wide in spectrum at the moment, it's an emerging technology still. But when we see among the people which are adopting this technology, they are making extreme progress and they are beating the competition. So they gain momentum. And the fact of adopting this type of technology makes them more competitive. So that's what I'm seeing in the field as basically I'm talking to a lot of company, but that's what we perceive.
I would like to talk a little bit on the topic of data. I was talking just a little bit about that. AI is often seen as a tool that delivers the most value to labs with extensive data sets. And this can be a significant hurdle to startups or smaller labs. Could you discuss the relationship between data volumes and AI efficacy in lab settings?
Yeah, yes, I can discuss it. I mean, I think it's, I hope it's pretty obvious that there is a link between the data quality and data volume, and the level of sophistication of your AI system. In fact, what went around this week on the internet was the release of a new model similar to ESM2 from Meta, released by a US company. They added a lot of new proteins inside their training system and saw a moderate increase into the performance on the test they realized. It's what we notice is that the relationship on the data quality, we think, in fact, and it's for me, it's my personal opinion, but I think the more data you have, the more the system is able to generalize into the edge case. And that's really the aim of a data factory like what Automata is building, is that you need to generate data to be able to capture the edge case and be able to have a system that generalizes. The concept of generalization is essential in AI in a way that you want to train a system and that the black box, in a way, or hard it is to explain would become, let's say, less of a concern if the system is able to understand everything. Okay, so the benefit is really greater than the downturn of like, you don't really know how it works inside. And you could accept that it's really a benefit and you could live with it. And that's really the aspect that you need to generate a tremendous amount of data on various, let's say, systems, biological system, like what you have in your demo room, to be able to train a AI model. I use AI model, and there are very, a broad spectrum of them, to be able to generalize and say that, yes, you have a system which can be used in all the use case of your company. Would it be a big pharma, a tech bio, a biotech? So that's my take on it, yeah.
And we've also seen a very interesting balance between open source models and kind of private closed source ones.
Mm-hmm.
And in this industry that is typically driven by IP tied into what you do inside that you can secure, where do you see the balance happening here? And do you see a shift more towards one side or the other, or you still think it's not very defined yet?
No, I think it's not defined. I think the jury is still out. I don't think there would be, I don't have a take on it, and I don't think the NVIDIA has a take on it. It's different commercial strategy at the heart of it. It's a choice, which the founders of company are making. Yeah, I mean, are the model which are non-private better than the model which are public? I think the curve is potentially growing at a slower pace into the public domain for example, the generalist large language model like Yama-tree or GPT-4, etc. There is a bit of difference for the private model. But you take is it really a clear winner? I don't think so at the moment. It's the progress is really like every month you have a new model coming out. So really, I mean, the race is still on. It's you cannot really say one is beating the other. Just wait a month and you will have a new one. It's really the case, really.
Well, in some cases, it feels like it's every week.
It is, yeah. What is more interesting is to notice that it's not too much about a monolithic model, which is important. It's you need to understand that model need to think as a group, and that's what we saw. It's called basically a chain of thought as a theory. So you use multiple relatively simple model. Let's say you don't need to have them extremely performant, but they all produce an interpretation of the information, and you have a model which is acting as a judge, and this model, this type of setup, will outperform a single model reasoning by himself. So that's the thing. And people think about those setups with multiple models, think about them as agents. And one of the agents, coming back to the topic of today, could be a lab. Meaning you ask a question to a system, like you would ask a question on Google, or is this particular protein relevant for this particular disease? And the system will search on the literature online through an API. You get access to the literature, will read all the publication way faster, better than you, remember interpret all the figures, summarize that, bounce it against you, you feedback information, bounce it against you, acting as a buddy, as a co-pilot. And then we are all researchers a bit, and then basically suggest a series of action to validate the hypothesis or answer the dark spot that we don't know what's happening there. And one of the suggestions would be to lead an experiment with a particular cell line into an automated lab and launch the job. A lot of people are thinking about that these days. So that's why I'm very happy to connect with you. It's, in my opinion, that's really the future of how can we tackle those very hard diseases to treat. There are some diseases where more experiment is needed. The information is so hard to understand and gather. So few people work on it that we need help, and we need to use every tool. Why would we not?
And I'm thinking now, in the partnerships that you've been exposed to, how would you classify the data readiness to actually start to move into that new world?
So the topic of data readiness is, let's say, always present. You always have some people which are not ready and some people which are accumulating those data. The data are perfect and they are not using them as the other one which are building the model but don't have the data. So you have a broad spectrum. So you have people which have data ready to be used and trained and used for training, and some people which are training but don't have the data. So from the outside, it looks like opportunities to connect people. But I think there is a need for bringing solution that makes the data ready by default. Out of the lab, it needs to come up into a format which is ready to be used by AI algorithm. And that's really, in my opinion, the future, that we need to simplify the thing. It should not be a human task to organize those data. It's not possible. We cannot continue to do that. We need to shelve it. In a way, it's fairly simple to do. And AI model can very much help us in this particular domain.
And I'm sure that NVIDIA has ways to support on this. Do you want to touch a little bit on means of enabling and speeding?
Yeah, so NVIDIA is, so my manager is the lead of healthcare, and she described NVIDIA as an end company. So we work with partners. So we provide solution, but we are not developing the solution for the end customers in a way that, for example, Automata is doing, or let's say Mistral, for example, is developing. We are not in this business. We are in the business of supporting this company which are building an end user product. Okay, so we see in the world basically, yes, a tremendous amount of effort to organize the data, make sense of data using AI. A good example in my field and sector is in the healthcare and the use of, for example, large language model to make sense of medical record for patients. Medical record are text, and there's always been a challenge to resonate in terms of timeline and do time series on text. In a way, you read a text and you want the AI agent to be able to say, okay, based on the text, because it's all text, plus a bunch of lab values, but mostly text. And you would like to predict what would be a potential risk for this patient. Traditional time series machine learning that we all learn in school are basically not so much relevant for text. Okay, you would need to do massive amount of messaging to process that, and it would not integrate well with the rest of the numerical information. So those AI models are able to summarize this type of information and gather input. So I would say, coming back to the point, is that the data topic and is essential, and in my opinion, yeah, we need to use AI for that.
I think Daniel, you have. Okay, maybe I hand over to you.
Timothy online has asked, how do you see the future of AI in drug discovery in terms of data quality? And have the studies conducted at NVIDIA used triaged, clean data, or is it open source data sets with no refinement?
At NVIDIA, so what we publish is online, so definitely. So we do have some research groups. We, of course, develop our own product also. It's a broad spectrum. So NVIDIA is doing a lot of other things, but we mostly use open source data. So we are not in the business of, so we don't do, for example, drug discovery on our own, of course. So we don't run patient trial or have cell lines and lab. So we are interested in the AI technology and methodology. That's our domain of expertise. So we work on training model, or can you train model in a better way, more efficiently, using potentially less resource. Yeah, I mean, making clusters of GPU more green, okay? There is an interesting metric is that in the more and more you go around the world, it's more important to have green compute resource, which are carbon neutral or eating as less possible electricity. And GPU is a way for doing that. So you get a lot of compute for the electricity you put in, okay? And that's what we work on. So you see our focus is not too much on the model performance itself, I would say, but rather on the methodology to achieve the training of those models. But we do deliver some models which interesting architecture.
One follow-up question from another viewer online, from Nicole. She asked that in a wet lab, if you identify an amino acid for a drug target against a protein, can this data be included in the algorithm to contribute to the power of the AI to perform in silico screening of a library of small molecules against that target?
Yes, definitely. And maybe Rui, you want to comment on that? Yeah.
So essentially, what NVIDIA provides is a foundational model. It's it's a way to kickstart you. It's a way to just get you there faster, and you then feed in and specialize it. And this is why I think, and I'm not NVIDIA, but I would say you don't really care, because you're setting the process to make it work, and you're setting the baseline for it to kind of ramp up. And then it's up for the client to make it as specialized or as good as the data input and the volume of data that they put in.
So to answer to this person online, absolutely. So it's what we describe in our world, and I think you describe it differently. It was interesting to see the contrast and your side of the world. So we describe that as lab in the loop. That the concept of Automata, in a way, lab in the loop is for us a model developer developing a model, let's say a protein model, okay, which is able to interpret what would be the effect of a mutation on a protein in a particular disease, okay? Will it be deleterious? Will it, basically induce a disease, an imbalance into the physiological level of a patient, or not? Would it be benign, okay, and you can ignore it? Those models can be informed by experiment in the lab, and usually that's how you improve models, okay? So the model, for example, that NVIDIA is training, or Meta are training, like the ESM family of model, are trained on public information that everybody can access. You and I can access it. You can go online and download the entire proteome of the human or of other species. And you can use that to train models. That's what has been done. But there is a limit. This data is quite complete, but you can always make it more complete on edge case, as I described. Potentially bacteria that nobody saw before, that you're sampling from somewhere. Tumors of patients which are mutated, which have an odd profile in proteins. And that will inform basically those information about, so not only you discover a mutation, but you know what this mutation is doing on the protein and on the patient. So a annotated information, and you feed that into the model, and the model will be able to interpret more information better, relate everything.
Do you have any more questions for this topic? Great. Maybe jumping to more like lab automation, which is a big interest to us. We already talked about how automation is contributing into the scale of the data side. Are you witnessing that in some way or form? Do you see evidence of this acceleration?
Definitely, we see acceleration. Let me think if what is public information. Especially online. Now we see definitely as an effect of data. I was saying this week a paper came out from Ginkgo Bioworks. Ginkgo Bioworks is BioTech, and they do have a lot of information about proteins, okay? And they train their own model based on the ESM2 model. And the effect is, it's still out, it just came out this week, but in a way, it's an example of increasing and improving particular model with information, okay, that nobody else has, and you create a better asset. In a way, in business term, you create a digital asset, which is differentiating your company, creating basically value, IP. Instead of only having, in a way, you describe it into your presentation, data which stay inert, you need to make it available. You need to make it useful. And one way to make it even more useful than storing it and organizing it is, in fact, to put it into a model right away. And retraining this model once in a while with the new data that comes in. But making it available into a model, make it even more actionable as data than leaving it for training. So it's a complementary offer. You have the raw data, but you also have the model available for the users. So yes, we see in the field, definitely, there is a huge engagement around data. It's not new, somewhat, I don't know, but 10 years ago, and show my age here, but 10 years ago, there was this big rage of big data. There was conference all over the place. Everybody was talking about big data. For the younger in the room, that was a big thing. So big data, but we're not talking about AI at the time. No, I mean, there was a huge, basically tidal wave of everybody talk about AI, and somewhat we forgot a bit big data for a while. And now it's coming back because people kind of invented the model, but really what we see happening is that the people which are really shining are the people which have the data and the AI capabilities, I would say, the capability to train model. So yes, it's essential to have the data. Yeah. And we see at NVIDIA, definitely the lab automation, the way forward. I mean, you need to speed up this data factory and make it something that exists really.
And where do you see like the AI tools that you describe and these kind of accelerators that NVIDIA has to get people to go instead of 0 to 1, 1 to 100 in many cases? Where do you see that in terms of compatibility with existing lab automation platforms? Where do you see that happening, if at all?
So I described it before. So we are an end company. So when we build something like a framework to train models, is because that's really what our core competency. We build system to train. Okay, we take care of, for example, of that it's compatible with the data that exists out there. So we developed in fact a framework called BioNeMo. You might have heard about it. BioNeMo is if you want, it's a framework written in Python with facility to load the data, and because it's bio-oriented, so it's for bio type of models. So we have data loaders for FASTA sequence for protein and DNA. And we have also data loaders for SMILE string for the chemistry. And we have a series of foundational model in it, like the one I mentioned many times, ESM2. We have a series of other models, some for chemistry, some for protein folding, that make basically and simplify the task of you don't need to build and compose your own platform. You have there a platform which is fairly complete, where you can take a foundational model, retrain it with your data, and the recipe or to retrain those models is written down in a Python notebook. So that's what we do at NVIDIA to simplify this task and get you faster into the world of having a productive system, let's say a productive AI model, which is making sense for you. I mean, so that's where we spend our time, building this type of framework for making the revolution happen.
Maybe now switching more into industry partnerships. We know that NVIDIA has been collaborating with Recursion with the aim to accelerate the training of IA foundation models in biology and chemistry. Can you give us a little bit of a glimpse on that?
A little bit, yes. So I was not involved in the Recursion. So Recursion is based in the US and managed by my colleague in the US. But yes, so Recursion has been on the, it's public, basically, they bet on foundational models, and they are building those foundational models to speed up the drug discovery process. That's the extent of basically what is my knowledge about recursion. So I don't know too much about them. But one of the framework, basically, which is of potential interest to them is BioNeMo that I just mentioned, which is simplifying the task of loading the data and training the model. Yeah.
What do you think could be good learnings for bigger pharma companies to learn from this? And how could they apply it?
So I'm on the NDA of every single pharma company mostly. So it's so I mean, what is a big learning? I think it's not only for big pharma. Everybody is paying in the field is paying attention to that. So what happened right now is that everybody is interested. As they are looking at what is happening and having early investigation, or like basically the leader in the field, like recursion, but there are many others, which are pushing the boundaries and taking a bet in a way. Taking a bet which is getting less and less of a bet and more like a strategic move, in my opinion, to position yourself for the future. And the realization is that it's not an overnight transformation. It's not the story of training one model, and this model will basically do the job of everybody in the company to invent a new drug. It's not that. What the state of mind that is, let's say, the good one to have for this company like Big Pharma is to understand that it's a needed evolution into the drug discovery process, which are inside their company. They need to, the leader in the field understand that it's a process that will take decades, but at the end, they will have the tools. Here I talk about model, but also labs, automated labs. They will have data factory and AI factory at the concept level. They will have that. And they will be able to go faster and cheaper than the others and beat the status quo that we have at the moment, which is like 15, 20 years to invent a new drug. We want to go faster. So why did it cost, and it's written everywhere, why did it cost less and took less time before? It's because there was a lot of low-hanging fruit. Like in every field of medicine, at the beginning, there was low-hanging fruit. You knew the protein that was the culprit. And it was like, you go for it, you target it, and you solve a very large population, a disease for a population. But as you go forward, I mean, there is less of those usual suspects coming around, and you need to start targeting basically the rest of the disease, which are less prevalent in the population. There is less patient, there is less information, and they are more complex. And those diseases were left on the side for this particular purpose because they were more complex to tackle. Diffuse is like yeah. So that's really the thing that is happening. And people are creating, so the company of the world right now, it's not only Big Pharma, are creating the machinery to tackle those challenges of the human race, really.
And given what you're describing, which is, it's very much specialized in the sense people will start to now look into these edge scenarios, and there's so many. Where do you see collaboration being? Is it something that we can see as it will need to happen and it's important? Do you see any, like, even evidence of that collaboration starting to happen because of now it's not a single problem, so many edge problems?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think it's not a new feeling, but yes, there is definitely a need, which is recognized by everybody, to create consortium and a collaborative approach to tackle some very hard disease. So those collaboration always need to be framed into a non-competitive manner, meaning so you can collaborate, but you don't want to create IP when you collaborate, because otherwise it's a bit tricky. So the collaboration happened like usual with academic institutes, between basically big players in the field, sharing data anonymously, such as basically using federated learning, training models, using the data of the others without seeing the data, creating better tools, again, using this particular approach. but the collaboration happened naturally also between researchers to tackle those diseases. I said it's natural. People are forced to do that because as you go into the edge case of disease, non-low hanging fruit, basically the high hanging fruit, the way of tackling them involve not only small molecules. Suddenly you need to use, in a way, other therapeutic modalities. Not only we all know about antibodies, small molecules, yeah, but there is an even more fancy way of tackling disease, gene therapy, cell therapy, that's basically the nomination of those various model for therapy. And there is plethora of tools, therapeutic tools to use outside. And that will come in a way, collaborating, yes, but also becoming a master in them is essential. And potentially, I mean, Automata would say has a good place in that because you can combine those labs in a, I'm surprised your platform is fairly compact. It's
yeah,
it combines
one of the
a lot
big things that we
machine
have to thank Dan and the rest of the team for.
Yeah. It's so there is something there. Increasing collaboration will be done through technology, but also by smart ideas like the Automata platform, I would say. Yeah.
So, question now on NVIDIA and even this type of compute. What are the main challenges that you're facing when you're trying to implement this? Because it's not a single machine. You kind of have to scale it for the types of volumes data that you're trying to process. What are the challenges that you're facing in terms of implementing or bringing it into your customers?
We can talk for our NVIDIA about that. Definitely, the challenge of computing. Yeah. So I will. So I'm not a computer scientist by training. So I'm a bioinformatician, genetician. But as I mentioned before, it's the next generation, and that's what we see in the online service that begin to appear, like Perplexity AI. I don't know if you use those tools online, but those AI chatbots, in a way, are more and more using what we call a chain of thought. I mentioned it before, which are multiple agents. Some of them will basically, so you ask a question, and the system will interpret your question and launch different tasks in the back, such as querying PubMed for publication, going on the FDA clinicaltrial.gov website, going on Campbell for the chemistry, analyzing that. You also give him a folder full of PDF you care about. It will read all of that and summarize this information. And all of that are what we call agents. And there is a computing challenge there, is that agent, in a way, large language model or AI system, they need to live into GPUs, okay? So they live into one physical GPU. So you need a very interconnected machine, and that's what we created and we released in last GTC. That's our NVL72 machine, and it's meant to tackle this particular challenge. So the NVL72 is, if you want, build to tackle this challenge of having multiple AI agents living and interacting together. And at speed, because the problem is that you need to have them talk to each other quickly. So that's some of the challenge we work on, obviously.
So one thing for me is very obvious is it feels like everyone should be tackling this right now and using these tools right now, but I know many are not. What do you see as the blockers for the industry to really start to uptake on this?
So for the industry, I would say the industry is all of us in this room. So we are all the industry, it's us. So I think it starts with us. What is strange is that, so I left, if you want, the research side of my career some time ago, but I still do a bit of research from time to time. We publish a paper with collaborators. And when I do that, I start using AI tool more and more, such as reading publication, etc., summarizing the information, like 300 publications summarize. So it just takes a bit of time for something to pick up steam, I think. It need a bit of a ramp up. And I think basically we are all getting up to speed with this technology. The services are still fairly new online. People need to get aware of it. I mean, it's not like as easy to use as Google. It's not that available. It's a bit sometimes obscure, so you're not involved in those things every day. Your advisor, PhD advisor, might not know this particular domain, might be skeptical about it. So there is we need to ramp up, and we are on this particular wave of adoption at the moment, I think. So it's not like we are not using it, but I think people which are adopting it, I never saw anybody saying it's useless. It's like it doesn't give good result. No, it's very useful. Every time it's like, yeah, I went faster. It did this task faster. It simplifies this particular aspect. I'm still needed to do the rest. But this thing, like reading, gathering information, pointing me in the right direction, where should I search? That is great. And it's more powerful than the search engine. Yeah.
Oh, there's
a question in the room.
There's a question in the room.
I have basically two questions about language models. The first one is, do you agree with the craze of pretty much most of the research right now is about language models and making an assistant of sorts with language models? So do you agree with this, or do you feel like there are other modalities like images, DNA data, or multiple other modalities that people should also look into?
Yes. So in a way that I understand your question, but I think a lot of people are working across all the modalities. So there was a paper this year from the Church Lab in Harvard describing the impact of large language model and AI tool in general on drug discovery. And there is two branches. There is definitely the tools like large language model on text, and they are very useful for certain tasks. And there is what he calls a scientific model, okay? And the scientific model are very much used for interpreting DNA, amino acid sequence of proteins, etc. Okay, but there is research in both. So I would say the field at the moment, the bleeding edge. So people are trying to combine those models together and have something that is able to use those models as an artificial intelligence system, if you want. Something which is able to query a large language model and also query a specific single cell GPT, for example, for single cell DNA, RNA, and able to interpret the result of it in a comprehensive way and summarize that and try to relate what the specialized genomic model is returning in addition of reading PubMed. How does that relate? I mean, so combining those intelligence, which are specialized intelligence system, together is a tricky part, I would say. That's where the field is at the moment. Yeah.
There's potentially an interesting segue from some of the online questions here, because we're talking about multimodality AI. And online has been asking about closed loop labs. And if you're asking about closed loop labs, come to our November event where we'll be talking about that. But I'm wondering if you could speak just a little bit about where you're seeing the state of the art in that, where the barriers are, where the success is around closed loop systems.
So I should admit, I don't know too much about that. So I mean, where do I see the success? I know that some people are looking into it and building those particular lab in the loops. That's what we call it. So that's what you call closed loop lab. So we call that lab in the loop, but I think it's the same thing. So it's for us still. So at NVIDIA, it's an emerging field. We are very cognizant of it, but it's a field we are like very keen to engage with. And I was coming here with an open mind to learn about, in fact, this particular field. So maybe Rui, you might have an opinion about those closed loop effect.
On closed loop, could you reread the question?
Sure. Well, we had a question specifically from Henry, and he says, is there any model designed for closed loop experiments? Can we get where the system can give the results of an experiment and the model then recommends what should be tested next? Has anyone tried this?
Because for us, from an automation perspective, we actually I think we're doing that in one of our customers, if I recall correctly, or we're implementing something that will enable that soon. Because our automation can work in a loop, and depending on the cell that the work cell that you design, this is something that it's easy to feed in. And the AI model can run in the cloud or it can run locally. You can even train it and in the next pass inference on it and then train it again. You can have multiple models where you can make decisions based on one model to feed another model in. You can have even multiple models being fed by this. Like you did a sampling, you determine what the result was. You make a decision based on this, and based on one thing, you can even feed one model. Based on another, it could feed a separate model. So the question for me is on the model itself. It's not something I think I could fill in. More from an automation perspective, it is possible even today, and it's something that we're helping build. So,
I mean, quickly to answer this question is that you don't need an AI model to make a decision every time. So sometimes it's just a readout of the lab, you know, value above 5, and basically it's good enough. Your cell is viable. You can take this sample readout and integrate it into your training data set in a way. So AI model are not needed at every step, I would say. Yeah.
Do we have another question?
We have one to end
Maybe
on,
Okay.
but if we have a few more here.
Sorry, I have one. Thank you so much. It's been very interesting to hear you both. My ears pricked up when you were talking about the different agents involved in a sort of composite AI that solves these problems, and then with the church lab that's integrating several different partners. Just comparing that to how human beings would solve this problem, there's sort of an awareness of where you are in the project of like, we're all at ground zero right now. No one really knows anything. We're skeptical and we're feeling our way. But the nice thing about an agent system is that it's modular. So after it's been running a little while, you can say, actually, we do want to integrate PubMed into this, or we do want to integrate chemical knowledge into this. I don't know if the state of the art is that the hierarchy is set, or is there no hierarchy, all agents are equal, or does it evolve in any way? Has anyone been playing?
I cannot answer that if it's all the agents are equal. There is a bit of an order in the execution in a way that, but I think you can think about it as a flat system. So you have an interpretation of the information. Maybe you have a chain. Yeah, you have some. I don't know if it exists at the moment, but yeah, you could imagine definitely something which is generating a query based on that, submitting another thing. So in a way, there is not only the controller or the first agent which is sending all the order, but the second one below could send one order below and interact between the agent. People are thinking certainly about that. It's pretty obvious.
It just seems like the hierarchy is absolutely key, because if in normal research, that's the most experienced professor is telling people, oh, you're going to waste your time, right? Which can be wrong as well. But like, hopefully you're avoiding wasted time, which is the most important thing for this big data scale, right?
So it could be like that. It could be also just a fully connected network below the controller. So I know that. So at the end, the answer needs to be summarized. So the information needs to be summarized to be fed back to you. So there is always the last step is summarization of all the information, which can happen in multiple steps. Okay, summarization of summarization of summarization, and at the end, because you want to answer the question, you want to have an answer to your question. You ask a question, the answer might be quite complex, but there is a layer which need to digest this result and feed it back to you, because the agent don't keep the information. There's no interest, no conscious.
I would say from a reproducibility perspective, if it's not there now, you will have to have at least a version that supports that, because you may want to have always the same result or as close as possible to the same result. And that may even dictate that model and the approach that you're doing with the agents, you cannot feed additional information because it's going to change the results that you get. And it may force into your model now to be like more seasonal. I have this version up to this date, then I have another version that started 6 months afterwards, because especially on a lab setup, you have to have that reproducibility. It could be that your experiment even sets only into that set for the lifetime of the experiment itself. Because otherwise, how are you going to compare results if the system is evolving, that you're going to do that comparison? So there's more considerations on that I would say, if it's not doing that for some of the scenarios where it's using chain of thought to be ordered, it will happen because it's necessary.
Mm.
So it's not a question of if, it's when.
Mhm.
Maybe this is a good segue into compliance and your thoughts on that. How do you see compliance coming into AI? And I'm not talking ethics that I know that everyone talks about, but more like, where do you see regulation potentially coming into the industry for AI models?
So, I'm not really commenting on regulation of for the company. That's and definitely not my role. But what we do at NVIDIA is, so we have a particular product which is quite useful. So I think we all played at the beginning with a different AI system which are online as query, you know, and you see the maybe sometime wrong answer. Or we all heard about this example, terrible example, basically when the answer is like absolutely not correct, you know, or completely off track or offline, you know, should not be allowed to say that. But those were research tools at the beginning, put in the end of the grand public, you know, and you end up with errors, obviously. So quickly, I mean, people understood that you needed to put guardrails around those systems. Otherwise, I mean, because they don't think, they don't understand every context, they don't understand sensitivity of the human race in a way. They just like repeat stuff. You need to understand that they are reflecting into a latent space, which is just vectors of numbers, and they output whatever they think, I mean, is defined in those vectors. So for them, that's their world. And so in a way, so we developed a system called guardrail, which is keeping, in fact, that the name has the definition in it, is basically keeping the answer into a particular domain. And you say, okay, the system is not allowed to comment on political question. And everything that is output by the LLM and is talking about politics is kicked out or something like it. So that's how I understand the guardrail. It's even more complicated in I mean, internal working, but it exists everywhere. That's how you keep them on track. Yeah.
So in a sense, it's likely during this nascent that it's more self-regulation and it's more self-boundaries to keep things in place than it is of something really, really coming into play. Because it is going to evolve so fast until it reaches this stability
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
probably regulation will only start to come in after that phase, which is no different than what we see with social networks and crypto and
That's
all of
true,
these
yeah.
other different things.
Yeah. So in my domain of drug discovery, there is definitely, I mean, some models which are in a way regulated. The latest one was outputted by Evolutionary Scale. You might have heard about this particular startup. So they released a model. So they released a model called ESM3. And ESM3 is, if you want, kept close to them because it's able to generate sequence, okay, DNA and protein sequence, and it has such a good understanding that it could generate pathogen, okay? And that's basically some of the context. So that is public debate, you know, and what do you do with those models, etc. They are fantastic tools. We need them, but they need to be regulated, yes, in a way. So that's basically what is in the public domain. Yeah.
Now, maybe touching back into the workforce. So bringing us back into the organizations and into the people that are going to use it either on the day-to-day or helping design these tools. How do you see this change that needs to happen? Because it's more about change management that I would say than anything else of embedding AI or starting to educate about AI into the workforce. And where do you see the challenges there that we need to maybe tackle?
Yeah, so I mean, so that is something. So I've been in different roles in pharma, and what we call, so it's part of. This is not only those AI agent. Before it was it's called digital transformation, you know, and digital adoption, and it's not only AI and LLM inside. It's using the tools, the new tools out there, instead of doing that the good old way. So in a way, it's motivated by an imperative of efficiency and you need to go fast and cheaper. It's that's about it at the end of the day. So why don't you use that? And you see those tools, and I think the way to go is, yes, I mean, let's talk about it. So in debate like that, potentially, but also make those tools available to everybody. That is a way for demystifying the issue and making them, in a way, people realizing that they are just basically algorithm, and they are quite useful, in fact. And they, so you might have seen that, so even me, I mean, I use it, we all use it. It's, if you have Microsoft Office, the Pro version, I think, or maybe even, I don't know. So we have it, we have the Pro version, and there is a Copilot now in it. It's everywhere. It's in all their apps. It's in Word, PowerPoint, Excel. It's very useful. It's really nice. So I would say this type of co-pilot is the first step to evangelize and make them, so people need to find a use for them instead of just talking without knowing. They need to experience it more than anything. And I think this type of, let's say, sometimes you need to make it available where people are. Bring it to the people is the right way.
Maybe just as a final question, as we're coming to time, what you see as interesting trends for the industry in the next 5 to 10 years that are touching this area?
So I think we talked about it all the evening, but it's the interesting trend is, to summarize, those multi-agent system, which are basically the next level, making specialized AI model for different modalities. So some will be multi-modalities, such as learning about single-cell RNA expression. So RNA expression is gene expression, but also being able to learn about epigenetic signature at the same time within the same model, so that the model understands what everything means together. So that potentially is the next, let's say, very next one is multimodal models. And after that, it's multiple model interacting with each other and being able to orchestrate, to the point, I mean, from our colleague here, is to orchestrate those models together will be the next challenge, I think. But really, I mean, the biggest thing is being able to generate the data to feed those models, because when you look at it, is that we are all turning around the same data. I mean, and everybody's training on the same data. So we need basically this data factory of yours. Yeah.
We have a few people online, I think possibly is a great way to wrap this up. A few people online asking how they can take a next step with NVIDIA specifically. Perhaps you can advise.
Yeah. Oh, yes, I can. Yeah. So go to ai.nvidia.com. So go to ai.nvidia.com. You will have a portal, and you can, so we build what we call playground, and that's where you will have the, what I described before, the NIMs. So the NVIDIA Inference Microservices, which are the easiest way, in our opinion, to experience those complex systems, but to deploy them on basically your hardware. So you can play with that in various computing platforms, would it be in the cloud or on, basically into your computer, and you can play around. But we also build playgrounds, so we build web interface for most of them, I think, where you can play around. So you have some for generating image. You have some in the healthcare domain where you can give an amino acid sequence, so a protein sequence, and it will fold it using AlphaFold. We have algorithm for docking, so basically a chemical structure and a protein. We have a model called DiffDock, which we made available, developed by the MIT. You can download it, deploy it also, improve it. So that's the world. So at NVIDIA, that basically we create this ecosystem of tools. So they are developer tools. Huh? Okay, so we work for the developers. Developer tools which are allowing you to make your first step in this particular domain. Yeah.
Well, thank you, David, so much for today, and thank you for everyone that is watching us.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.